to another live version of Noel Mcdermott's Wellbeing Show. And I happen to be Noel Mcdermott, and it's my Wellbeing Show. That's the only way I can remember things is if I labelled them that easily for me, because I've reached that point in my life where it's difficult for me to remember things like my name and what I'm doing. So this is very helpful to me. We've got a great guest on tonight, Conroy Harris, who've been having already a fantastic chat before the show. So it's going to be rock and roll tonight, folks. Really looking forward to it. Before we jump into it, and Conroy tells you about who he is and what he does, just to remind you, if you're listening to this on a Wednesday evening, it's the 17th of November at the moment, between 9 and 10 UK time. This is live, and we'd love to have you join in. You can give me a call or WhatsApp me. The number's +44 7506 319 745, and we'll post that number out. It'd be great to hear from you, and actually get you on air as well. You can chat to the amazing Conroy, and that's enough of me. I'm now going to bring us over to Conroy Harris. Hooah! Conroy, how are you doing?
I'm really good, and thanks for having me on, Noel.
I'm really excited that you're on. After sort of conversations we've been having, I'm really pumped about this evening having you. You're the CEO of a band of brothers.
A band of brothers. We are a charity. Yeah. We primarily work with young men, 18 to 25, who've been in the criminal justice system, and we're a mentoring charity. We work with some of the hardest, most difficult people the criminal justice system just won't work with, or has no way of working with, and we get alongside these young men, and we mentor them. We go through a rites of passage process where we take young men away for a weekend, and we go there. We look at what it is to be a man. What are your patterns? What's that internal message? Those internal messages that hold you back in your life. What is it you want to change about your life? Who do you really want to be inside of there? It's not a Bear Grylls weekend. It's one of those weekends where it's kind of psychological and it's in depth. And for many of these young men, they've never had such a level of intensity where they've had to work through various issues. And at the end of that weekend, we go on. They come onto a 3-month quest with us, where we mentor them one-to-one for 3 months, once a week. And they're also invited into our weekly circles. We have 10 communities up and down the country, from Cornwall up to Manchester, and those communities of men, older men, men from the communities where these young men come from, they also go through a rites of passage, and they also do that work. So we are working with the idea of positive masculinity to bring change and to reduce harm. And this sounds like an advertising campaign, doesn't it? It's like yes.
No, I tell you what it sounds like, Conroy. It sounds like somebody who gives a shit about what they're doing.
Yes, and that's the truth.
That's what it sounds like to me. And I'm really, really glad that you do, because somebody has to be doing this, right?
That's what we believe, and that someone has to do it. And it's like, sometimes when we're fundraising and looking for partners to work with, it's like, well, who else is going to do this work? That group of young men, 14 to 25, because we only work with 18, but if we go down the age group a bit, are the most difficult and hard to reach members of our society. They're the most kind of, in a way, psychologically deprived. Nobody is really giving a shit about that group of young men. They're the bad ones. They're the written off ones. They're going to come to nothing. We've seen over the past 20, 30 years a move away from manufacturing jobs and manufacturing industries to more kind of softer industries. And a lot of these men feel disaffected. And unfortunately, where a lot of them feel at home is inside, we don't like to use the term gangs, but in kind of groups of like-minded individuals. Let's say that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. There are odd words that have associations now that actually don't capture what the experience is.
Completely.
And sort of, I remember from my time, like, you didn't know, people don't know this. I literally took a phone call 2 seconds before we went on from a young man who's troubled, who I had to take into care today. And, I have to say social services were, slightly cynical, but actually they did a good job today, and I'm going to say even which one it was, but thank you for that, folks, for sort of taking this young guy in. And he was just phoning me up to just let me know that he managed to achieve certain basic. He actually went to the house they sent him to, and that's an achievement, man.
Yeah, that's great. Well done you, and well done them. And I know it's your show, but I was really kind of curious. How did that come about? Was this someone you met on the street?
No, I've known this kid for years. I've been working with him for years, and it's sort of finally it's all broken down with his family. So, duty of care and all that sort of stuff, and we're trying to sort of keep supporting him and keep things going. Maybe sort of this is where he's at now. This is where he's at in life.
Sounds like you give a damn too, Noel. So,
hey, don't you accuse me of things like that, Mr. Conroy, for goodness sake. Destroy my reputation on air. How dare you?
Well, I heard the call, so you can't deny it. He's not even making it up.
It was unusual. I think socials were a bit surprised, but they didn't see the version of me that used to exist a few years ago when I worked with Kids Company. And this is what I did all the time, was kick down the doors of social services and various services that didn't want to have anything to do with the kids that you're talking about, right?
Exactly.
They were afraid of them. And I understand why they're afraid of them, because they're quite frightening, to be honest.
Very scared. Of course they're very scared, because technically they are very scared.
That's right.
And what's been projected onto them from society, they project back in heaps.
Yeah. Let's go back a bit in time. I want to know why Conroy got involved in all this. Conroy from Nottingham, as I just said.
Yes.
We're both Midlands boys as well. This is really weird. We've got so many things in common. Because I'm from Birmingham, and again, just before the show, Conroy was going, you're a yum yum. And I'm like, I am a yum yum, he's a yum yum. And my producer was going, what, are they talking English? Like, yeah, that's English. That's Black Country English for you, folks. So how did this Nottingham boy end up as, a bloke who's turning up to the Lord Mayor's, not the Lord Mayor's, so the Mayor of London's office today, trying to pick.
Making a difference with Mopac. Yeah, well, I was actually born in Antigua in the West Indies. Right. And I came over here when I was very young. I was only like 1 year old, so I was a baby. And I've recently found out that actually I was meant to be left over there. My mum, she decided she weren't leaving the baby, and she brought me over here. Right. Sometimes I wish she left me there.
Yeah, right.
It was a difficult time being brought up in England in the kind of 60s, early 70s. Yeah. There was tough times, and the streets of Nottingham were tough. And I was actually quite a sensitive kid.
It wasn't as tough for everybody. For an Afro-Caribbean immigrant, it was tough.
Yeah, it was tough. My dad worked a shift. My mum worked a shift. They left me with babysitters who were cruel and quite heartless. And yeah, I had a tough start. I'm not going to labour the point. Many people had tough starts. And when I listen to some of the stories of the young men I work with, I'm like, whoa, you know what? At least I had two parents that worked. They may have been tough. They may have been hard and strict, but they put a shift in. They put bread, they put the meal on the table, and they kept us clean. So that's a really important piece for me, that parental piece, because whatever happened, I had that to go back to. I had that start to say, I know the right way. My old man, he put a shift in, day out, and he's still doing it. He's caring for my mother. You know, he's 86 years old, wow. And he cares for my mother, So that was my start. Grew up in the Meadows in Nottingham. Tough place, had to learn to fight, I didn't want to, I was soft. Yeah. I was a little softy, weak boy, but I was bullied. So the only way around that was, back in those days, teachers weren't interested. You had to kind of toughen up yourself. So that's the way it went. And I realized that by kind of being tough and throwing fists around, it gained respect. The wrong type of respect, but a certain type of respect that meant I was a bit safer on the streets and people would leave me alone. Yeah, that was the early life. Stuff wasn't good at home between me and my dad. We have a saying in the West Indies: you can't have two bull in the same pen.
Right.
And later, 16 years old, it was time for me to leave, really. And so I joined the Air Force. Royal Air Force, spent 6 years of that. Again, it wasn't all roses. I wasn't really cut out for so. I've recently found out I'm kind of dyslexic. and I've got some of this oppositional defiance stuff going on in me. And I always wondered, why is it when people say do something, I do the opposite thing? You know, before my brain even clicks into gear, I've just done, no, it was all, So I was always finding myself in scrapes. I got locked.
Went into the... Sorry, that's like hilarious. You've got oppositional defiance disorder and you're in the RAF. Hang on a minute. That must have been absolute hell.
I got locked up quite a few times.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. Yeah. I used to live in Colchester, which is the back of the army.
Good old army barracks, yeah.
No, you know Colchester well. Stay in the army, you get sent to Colchester. It's the same as the saying "get sent to Coventry." It's like you're going to be.
It's like that, yeah. Actually, it's not such a bad town, but my memories and thoughts about Colchester are like grim. But that's because I see it from inside one of the grimmest army barracks.
Because you were in prison there. Oh my God, I can't imagine what it'd be like to have oppositional defiance disorder in the armed forces. That's just got to be.
It didn't work very well for me. And I
guess they didn't have a very effective screening process in those days.
No. Can you dig holes? Can you kind of stand up?
Yeah, right.
You'll do. Yeah, well, actually, some good things came out of it. I went to Northern Ireland. I saw the class divide there, and the strange thing, I was talking. He was talking earlier about the riots back in '81. Back then, I was actually in Northern Ireland, and I was watching those things going on the streets of the UK, and it was really strange because members of the British Army, they were really quite racist and awful to me, kind of making the kind of link between me being black and what's going on the streets. And yet the local Irish people, the Catholics, they were great. There was almost like, you're lost, son. You do realise you're in the wrong place on the wrong side. And I actually felt more affinity to them and what was going on for them than I did with the British Army. It was, as a very confused young man.
I mean, it's interesting. I sort of remember all that stuff as well because my folks are Irish, both of them, and they came over in the 50s. And I was born and brought up in the UK. It's easy for me to assimilate because of my colour and accent, but I'm still a paddy when it comes down to it, and that's true. You can spot that, and I just have to say my name, and that's it. Do you know what I mean? It's like
it is.
And, you know, sometimes I'd still fall into the old defense of like, oh, Noel, it's French for Christmas. And it's not. It is French for Christmas, but that was what I used to hide away from the racism I was going to get because I was Irish. That's
exactly.
It.
Similar type of thing. And you know what? If one good thing has come about from not having so many old-fashioned stand-up comedians is a lot of those Irish jokes, they never worked.
Yeah, well, they weren't clever at all, were they? I mean,
no, you had to go with this kind of working assumption. And interestingly, that never worked for me because the family next door to us, growing up in the Meadows, there were 13 of them, the Norrises, again Catholic, and they were great. They you know, even though there's 13 of them, when my mum's in hospital, they took us in and kind of fed us, and you know, so I always had this affinity with Irish people and the Catholic thing. So,
but I mean, a lot of people have forgotten this, but that was actually the way it was, and you know, when you had the racial slums in the UK, they were Irish and black, Afro-Caribbean and Irish.
Yeah.
Together. And same where I live right now in Stokey, I told you. It's my middle class bloke who runs the show, James, doesn't know any of this stuff. And he's 45 and he's only just getting his own place to live. I mean, it's like, what's all that about, James? Seriously. Anyway. But actually Stokey, which is in Hackney, used to be the black and Irish slum in Hackney. And it's slowly gentrified over the years. And it might be a metaphor for me, actually. I've slowly gentrified over the years, which I think you have a little bit yourself, haven't you?
Well, yeah, I've not quite got as far as you have yet.
You can still throw the insults out there, though, mate, can't you? Yeah, no, you go for it.
Well, no, you're a bit more gentrified. Yeah. I'm on my way, though. Give me another couple of years.
Yeah. I'm sure you'll catch up. You're quite precocious. So you're in the armed forces. You're a square peg in a round hole.
then they threw me out.
Very interesting. I mean, I think there was actually, I'm fairly sure there was a television play based around the idea of an Afro-Caribbean British soldier in Northern Ireland. And I'm trying to remember the name of it, but I remember watching it. Quite something. If I remember it, I'll send you a text of it. It was actually really, really interesting because the play was, it was a television play and it was exploring the themes that you're talking about, which is like, what am I doing here? What am I upholding here? Whose gun am I holding? And why am I holding it? Yeah.
You know, these guys that are on my side are calling me all the eggs and, you know, black bastards under the sun and giving me all the evils. And the Irish people are kind of shaking my hand and winking at me and saying, you know, telling me and wising me up. And I'm like, there's something not working here.
Yeah. And it's interesting as well, thinking about the recent stuff in cricket and Yorkshire Cricket Club and the appalling ways they've responded to that poor guy for just simply saying, will you stop calling me horrible names?
I found that really interesting. I was saying to our last yesterday, it's like, wow, if I went back all those years, I just saw it as right. This just toughens me up. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you think you can say something to me that's going to trigger me, that's going to push me over the edge. You didn't come from where I come from in the Meadows, mate. You know, back in Nottingham, we had gangs of white youths driving around our streets looking to. So yeah, that was an everyday occurrence. Wogs go home on the streets, people putting shit through people's letterboxes. Yeah. All of that. That was the kind of what I grew up with in the 60s and 70s. So I hear and I get it, and it's not right what that cricketer, that young man went through it. But I remember back in the day, it's like, wow.
Which is to say that we've come along we haven't reached nirvana yet, but we have come a long way, and those are tough days. And I remember the riots in Birmingham, the first race riots that we had, and they were full-on things which were dealing with
revolution.
It was dealing with, I felt as well, the poverty that came from this divide. And it's poverty that kills people in the end. Totally.
And where you're right, I remember just before this, you was talking about something was different then, and we talked about this a sense of a social change that those riots kind of that sparked off. And if you think about the music that then came out from the West Midlands off the back of all that, the UB40 and you know the specials and all that two-tone, there was definitely a sense of a youth movement. We had punk just on around that time. And there was a mobilization, if you like. I remember again, even when I was in the Air Force, punks and Rastafarians uniting together, rock against racism, fighting the National Front on the streets. It was very hopeful. And it's very strange all these years later that racism is again so big in our consciousness. When back in those days, like we're winning this. This is going to be over by my children's generation. And it's just different.
It's mutated. It's definitely mutated. One of the interesting things I experienced, I don't know if you came across this, but I ended up doing some work here in London in various sort of social services boroughs. I was a social services manager for a long time. Hence, I was the one who took this kid to social services today, because it's like, yeah, try it on. I know it. I was on the other side of that fence. I know exactly. But I sort of remember, because I did a lot of work with asylum seekers when local authorities, when social services had duties towards them, and just people were foul and pestilential in their racism towards asylum seekers at that time, and that included second generation Afro-Caribbean Irish immigrants who, you know, like me, you know, people who've been born and brought up in Britain, and I thought that's really weird. You don't get the connection between what happened to you, your mum and dad, and what you're now spouting off in terms of.
I remember having a conversation with someone around this, about an Afro-Caribbean person, and he says, "Why should they get it easier than we had it?"
I came across that attitude a lot. Yeah, and
we paid our dues to be here.
There is something in that psychology, isn't there? There's something in the psychology of listening to maybe this stuff around the Yorkshire Cricket Club and going, is that so serious? Is it really so serious? If I was on the streets fighting for my life, and now you're saying you're upset by a few names that you've been called, but in a sense, that's where we want to be, isn't it? We want to have moved on.
Yeah, no, we would want to go back to that. Of course, this is more progressive, and it's more subtle, and it's the nuance of what we're talking about now. When we talk about unconscious bias and the attitudes that people hold inside themselves, I see. For me, one of the big shifts and change that I had to go through personally was kind of growing up and realizing, God, I'm really quite homophobic just by my upbringing. Just by my Afro-Caribbean kind of working class upbringing, I'm homophobic. It's inside of me. And I remember the first time I met a kind of I had a friend who was gay. He was a boxer, and I didn't know he was gay. So he was just a tough boxer.
Yeah, right.
And he took me to this party, and after this tournament, and he was a lovely guy. And then I turned around, and he was kissing his boyfriend. And I remember I'd never seen that. I'd never seen a man kiss a man. Everything just dropped away. And then he looked at me and I thought, I've got nowhere to go now. I just have to submit.
I love it, those moments. But you had the capacity, I guess, at that point to just go, okay, this is where I am. I'm going to have to deal with this. Which is great. And all of that is segueing into this work with these young men and how you got into it, because what we're talking about is your life journey and the sort of the richness of that, the richness of your personal growth that you bring to your current work. So there you are. What sort of part of your life is that when you discover that you're homophobic? What sort of age were you?
It didn't really dawn on me because, again, I'm 60 now, so I'm living at a time when homosexuality was decriminalized in my lifetime. And
quite exactly. Yeah.
And these things. So it was like society was homophobic. So it was like it was strange if you wasn't. That wasn't a name for it. They were just bad people. And of course, being brought up a Christian as well. This is like that's the devil's work, you know what I mean? Man doing all of that with man. So it was at that point when Mark with his boyfriend, and he spoke to me, and his boyfriend was so lovely. It was like, wow, there is no difference. They're just really, he's just a really lovely person. Yeah. And so it then dawned on me that I couldn't carry on that. I see, interestingly, I made that connection. I was about 23, 24, and I made the connection between the idea that the discrimination that was meted out against me was very similar to what I and people like me would mete out to people like these guys. And it's like that there was bullying. It was kind of, and there was something about my upbringing that I was always for the underdog. And so, and I tell you what also shifted my consciousness was Quentin Crisp.
Oh yes, yeah, he was extraordinary, wasn't he?
He was extraordinary.
Amazing guy.
And I was just taken away by this man. It's like, wow, what a life. Yeah. And it's like, so in my head, it's like, okay, God, if you exist, you can't hate people just for loving another person of the same. Yeah, exactly. That can't work.
I mean, what's interesting is I think that there's something about, like, there's some, I'm going to use the word gang, not to describe the young men that you're working with, but to describe our culture and our society. Now, in a dysfunctional gang culture works on this basis, that it's strictly hierarchical and punishment is meted down and you scapegoat at various levels. Okay. And interestingly, I was re-watching a television series that I sort of called Hitler's Inner Circle, which just is gang or mob. And it's about the divisions that existed in this group of foul, pestilential, horrible people. And the various hierarchies. So Rome, who is the early sort of leader of the SA, was ousted because he was gay, and that's how they got him. And there's all this stuff going on, and that's actually, in some ways, that's the internal organization within our own mind when we live in a highly dysfunctional cultural society. We're always looking for somebody to scapegoat so that it doesn't happen to me.
Exactly.
I can point a finger at somebody else, I become safe. And that's like my experience growing up in a family where there's lots of violence and stuff like that, that's what you did. You always were trying to get your sibling in trouble, because then you didn't get hit yourself, you know. That was
it doesn't work like that in our family. Yeah, that was the theory, but because I was the oldest, I got hit anyway. They got theirs, and I got it as well for not stopping it in the first place. So yeah, that's another reason.
What my mum used to do to try and stop that was that if you told a tale on one of your brothers or sisters, she'd thump them and then come and thump you for telling the tale.
There it is. That's the justice. Yeah,
there's that sort of, and I think that's the sort of way our minds get organised. I mean, we become these internal gang thug-like things that begin to, and that's the impact, I think, that, you know, these various levels of oppression and discrimination have, and that's what we're talking about here. It's not necessarily, I mean, people might say, well, are we really that racist? Are we like that anymore? But actually, what we're talking about is how people's internal lives are organised, and how they experience themselves and therefore project themselves in the world. I mean, that's really what we're looking at.
And how that internal sense of disorganisation around that is then mirrored by the external. Yeah. And without going too political, if we look at the external system where we've got the hierarchy, the richest countries at the top and the countries at the bottom who get bullied and kind of scapegoated, it's exactly the same thing that's going on, that I see anyway.
I mean, it is that. And it's, I just think about even more immediately than that. If you look at the recent stuff in Parliament, where the boss of England, Joe, decided to try and cover his mate who clearly broken the rules. We know he's broken the rules. He's been independently found out, and then his mate tried to change the rules, and we know that that's how it works. I mean, actually, it's been stopped in its tracks, which is the other thing that concerted political action can do, which is can challenge injustice, and that also is possible.
Possible, but really, how many people give a damn now? You know, I don't want to go down the political rabbit hole, but the Tories, if there was an election called tomorrow, would win. So
without doubt, yeah.
Really
we're not gonna have that conversation when we go. Corbyn has broken the Labour Party. Let's not go there, because that's like, you get phone calls though. I'm telling you. But I mean, that is the reality, isn't it? And it's interesting. Like in social today, I was talking to somebody about this, a social worker, about a sort of the impact of boarding schools, and I said, "Oh, boarding schools are dreadful." She went, "Oh, are they?" She had no idea. I said, "Yes, they are. Actually, they are really dreadful places to have to grow up in. Take a look at Bojo. Look at how damaged that man is, and he definitely is damaged. And he's the pinnacle of this supposedly amazing school system, and that's what it does. Is it produces somebody that broken, and that's all it ever does. Is
like I said, I spent a long time working in the field of mental health.
Yeah,
and the idea of this privilege, I often used to look at some of the white men that would end up in our day centre, end up kind of high, you know, kind of on all sorts of drugs, and it's like, what was your background as architect? And the amount of them that had been to public school and were broken by that system, and I was like, well, if that's your privilege to be kind of be born into that, you can stuff that, mate. You can keep it, and the other ones that didn't, who then make it, well, look at their lives internally. A lot of them are a wreck.
Yeah.
You know? And that sense of being able to truly connect and be open open your heart to people, that's missing from a lot of the men I meet. Not all of them.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is interesting. I think it is really informative in terms of what you're bringing to the table, which is to look at what it is to be a man in society today, and in particular, to look at it from the context of some of the most marginalised and feared young men. And how do we deal with them, and why are they marginalised? Why are they so feared? Probably to some extent absolutely appropriate to be thoughtful about your relationship with people who can do some severe damage, but why are they in that place in the first place? So let's begin that conversation, Conroy, about, so Tell me about your move into a band of brothers. So I've got some sense about you. You've been somebody who's, you've always been a freedom fighter, essentially.
Yeah, the bit that's missing that's really useful before I move into that is when I came out of the Air Force. I always say Maggie Thatcher saved my life, really.
Oh, really?
The reason I say that is because I hated her so much and hated what the Tories were doing that I found left-wing politics. I found kind of militant tendency. And I was on the streets of Stafford in those days. And I was into petty crime. And my anger was then channeled towards kind of left-wing politics and socialism and those ideas. And so that kind of gave me a very basic education, a grounded education.
I really identify that, actually, Conroy. Again, it's really strange how many overlaps there are in our lives, because I discovered revolutionary socialism at an age when I was making a decision as to whether I was going to join the armed struggle or not as an Irish boy. And I decided not to. And partly I decided not to because I also found some male role models that I found extraordinary, one of them being Nelson Mandela, for example. And I was looking at this guy and I was going, I can't do this. This is not right. I can't go off. I had enough insight to understand I'm angry, but that doesn't justify me then acting out on that and wanting to blow things up and wanting to kill people. And it was extraordinary influence, I have to say, on this young mind.
I mean, if you think about that way you're talking about this, so you have the young Irishman in that struggle and kind of really hated on by the whole British establishment, and for a lot of reasons. And yet there were many of us who were celebrating young black men in South Africa who were fighting for their freedom in the ANC and pushing against the system. And it's like, so I had this dichotomy kind of, to me, they were both right, but again, you can't justify that level of damage against society in your head somehow. I
think also because I had too much insight at that point. I got involved in the arts, I was involved in theatre, I was sensitive, all of that sort of stuff. And I remember, as a kid carrying around a knife because I was afraid I was going to get assaulted and stuff. I understand why you do that, right? But then I remember why I gave it up, because I then imagined myself pushing the knife into somebody and I was disgusted.
Exactly.
I couldn't do, I was like, I can do it in my head when I was angry, but then when I was imagining it walking down the street, it just made me feel really ill and wrong. And I just thought, shit, I could do this when I'm angry and it could be justified. I could be looking after myself because I'm afraid, but I know how bad I'm going to feel afterwards. And I can't maintain that sense of justification for it. And I just don't want this. And I remember just throwing it away at that point because my imagination wouldn't allow me to do that to another human being.
It's quite amazing. The crossovers, again, I had a very similar kind of episode in my life as well, where it was like, no, God, I saw myself in the prison cell kind of having used the knife. It's like, no, that can't work. I was gifted by being a very good athlete. And so I just worked out, if I was too outnumbered, run. And that was my best weapon. So anyway, just to finish that part, I had a kind of bit of a tough time on the streets, petty crime, left-wing politics. And then I moved to Oxford to get away from the kind of recession up in the Midlands. No work and all that type of stuff. And when I came to Oxford, I found work, and I started a family, and it was from there. So now this is the piece. The rescuer in me found a woman who needed rescuing.
Okay.
I rescued a woman who was as damaged as I was, and we had a difficult relationship. I won't go into all of that and her past and what was going on for her. But at some point, she got sectioned into the mental health system. At that point of her being sectioned, suddenly something else snapped inside of me. It's like, wow, I'd never come face to face with that system before. Taking those two children to visit their mother and then being seen as the enemies, being seen as some by the nursing staff as part of the problem, when I was actually trying to work my ass off to try and keep this family together. It's like, no, this is wrong. And then a friend of mine says, well, you're a mouthy git. why don't you come and train and be a mental health advocate? Why don't you come and train and do this volunteering? And it's like, you know what, why not give that a go? And that's where the change, that's where it turned around for me. I went into mental health advocacy. I then went to, I got some education, went to Ruskin in Oxford. Then I got into a professional life, blah, 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 blah. And years of mental health, men's groups, all the rest of that turnaround of life that we hear, that's many people. And the point where I'd had that background and I saw a Band of Brothers poster on a Facebook page, I looked at the poster. There was a picture of all these men just on their weekend, and I was like, oh my God, I'm in there. I could actually see myself, and it's like, no, this is for me. I want whatever they're doing, whatever that is, that these men have got together. There's black men, there's white men, there's young men, there's old men. They're all in there, and they've got their arms around each other, and something is happening here, and I want some of that, you know. And for me, there's a sense, the sense of what's going on with the young men on the streets and the disconnect. And there's something that you just said there as well, Noel, that the lack of positive role models for our young men. It's like, you know, the best role model that you can get for me is not a sports star, it's not a musician, it's your everyday bloke who goes out and puts a shift in from 9 to 5. He works, he comes home, he looks after his family. They're the role models in our society. They're not picking their hand up to the wife. They may have a couple of pints on a Friday, but they put their shift in, pay their taxes, and then do their best. And that's like, right, working with those men to work with the young men, this has got to be a winner. So yeah, that's how I got involved.
Yeah, brilliant. I totally identify. I was thinking of Steve Biddulph.
Yeah,
while we were talking, and for people who don't know, Steve Biddulph's psychotherapist, actually worked with Australian Vietnam veterans, and there were quite a lot of them. Australia was heavily involved and did a lot with traumatized guys, and that was his specialty. Then wrote some really fabulous books: Raising Boys 2, Raising Girls, Raising Kids, Manhood. Really practical books that like take you through step by step how to do this stuff. It's amazing. I love the way he writes. I met him years ago when I was a father's worker up in Scotland, which was it's like such an interesting, weird experience. So I can't tell you.
An English father's worker.
That's right. I mean, it's like seriously, an English of Irish extraction Catholic father's worker in Edinburgh, in Protestant Edinburgh, right?
Wow.
It's like, seriously, it was a bit fruity and arty and all that sort of stuff, and it just qualified as a therapist and was full of himself. So there you go. And it was a laugh, I have to say.
Yeah, it's one of the toughest drug-addled kind of communities that the UK had at that time. Right. Wow, you're brave.
And he came to Scotland, actually. He was invited to do a conference, and I met him. He was like I imagined, a really nice bloke. And it's difficult for people to understand this, I think, who don't get it. But just meeting a really nice bloke is such a warm experience for me. Okay. I mean, it's just, there's something about it that I really connect with in here. And it doesn't matter where that bloke comes from, where their background is, what they look like, what they sound like. There's something I'm like, we were doing it just before the show, we were having, and you went at one point, you went, and I'm not a great big football fan or anything like that, but we were talking about football, and I said, I think, you know, I've seen the women's football game. I think it's a lot better than the men's football game. As the women's football final was the best. And we were talking about sports in this way. And then at one point you just went, hang on, I'm just having a really good conversation about these sports with some really nice blokes. And it's and it's right, there's something really cool about that for me as a man. When that happens.
Yeah, it's very connected. And I'm glad we've gone on to this subject, because this idea of what is masculinity and what makes a man it's under fire right now. And rightly so, you know, because there's been a lot of damage in society through this idea of hyper masculinity and the damage.
And you prefer that term to toxic masculinity, right?
The term toxic's like, if you call someone ugly enough, they become ugly.
Right.
You know, that term to young men, it's not, they don't differentiate from, they haven't got to the stage of their development where they differentiate their behavior from themselves. So I am my behaviors. So there's no point saying you have some toxic behaviors. Basically what they're hearing is you are toxic, you know? So the idea is this. Some of your behaviors, you are an okay person. You're not a toxic, you're not. But due to your background, due to your life circumstances, maybe there's trauma involved here. Some of these behaviors that you now used to act out from are not very helpful.
Mind if I correct you a little bit?
Yes, so, of course you can.
There will always be trauma involved.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to be a bit pleasant.
No. Trauma's at the bottom of all this shit.
Okay, really let's go Gabo Mate. It's always trauma. There's a lot of trauma.
In this field that you're working in, that you and I are talking about, it's not born, it's acquired through experience. And you can inherit trauma as well. I get all of that. But usually when people have inherited trauma, they often become addicts. That's what happens, right? That's what inherited trauma looks like mostly. But sort of acquired trauma from developmental, relational, societal, racism, exclusion, those types of trauma are always involved in the common, and that has to be the assumption here that that's what we're talking about. And it's also got to be the assumption that that's why so many black guys end up being defined as schizophrenic and banged up in psych wards, because the trauma is the bottom of that, and schizophrenia is an expression of trauma.
Exactly.
Right. And violence is often an expression. That's not to justify any of this.
No.
Hang on, no, I'm not. I'm saying if we have an insight into why this is happening, we can work better with it. We can deal with it better, because our systems that we have in place at the moment cannot do any work with it at all and are only making the problem worse.
Noel, it's so refreshing to hear you speak like this. It really is. It's almost, you're almost saying what can't be said anymore, that there is a kind of a reason behind why we are where we are. And it's not just about chop the bollocks off, but let's find out why the bollocks kind of got in that state in the first place.
It's really interesting. I think one of the interesting things, and I just want to remind people, this is a live show. You're welcome to phone and tell me I'm a total wanker. That's fine.
And me.
It's +44 7506 319 745. Do jump in, join in the conversation. What I'm going to say is something like this, that in this age of throwing away biological determinism, the one area where it's held on to is in defining young men and men as toxic and nasty. And it's because they're men. Biological, it's not.
No.
It's not about that. It's about construction. It's about experience, and it's about how that experience is responded to and reflected back, as you say. That's what it's about. And we have to own that to be able to change it, right? Completely.
On Sunday, it was Remembrance Day. And a lot of, not going to knock that. We're remembering a lot of people who gave their lives, men and women, for this country over many, many wars and many years. Who were those men? Who were those women? What backgrounds did they come from? What happened to them when they came back after those wars? And how were they integrated in society? And what did they carry? The scars and wounds. What then was passed on to their families? And we can generationally just plot and chart what's been going on here in terms of the recessions that they had to deal with. Again, it's not about making excuses, but let's look at the bigger picture here.
It's not excuses. I'll tell you why it's not excuses, because the Chancellor of the Exchequer today made a speech that said, for the first time ever, I've heard a British senior cabinet member, and I wonder if his colour has something to do with the fact he's willing to say this stuff, right? So a man of colour in the British government today said, one of the things that's happened is that the rates of depression have doubled, and we have to deal with that. We have to deal directly as a result of social circumstances. Because of the pandemic, we now have double the number of people experiencing depression that we had prior to the pandemic. That's the Chancellor of Exchequer saying that and we have to invest in services to deal with that. That's extraordinary.
Right? Is he conservative? Something
I don't know, because he produced a Labour budget the other day. Exactly. I don't know where this guy is coming. He's an entryist in the Tories. He's actually militant tendency.
Well, they're more socialist than Keir Starmer, it seems. So, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. It's the world there's something weird has happened to the world during the pandemic. I'm telling you, I'm living.
There you go. Let's acknowledge something weird has happened to the world during the pandemic. Let's also acknowledge that there is a trauma that sits in society. After this pandemic we got through, we're trying to rush back into normality. Let's pause. Let's take a moment to grieve. Yeah, because again, we can make the same mistake that we've traumatized our kind of whole system, and we're rushing back to work. Like
I want to bring us back a little bit, though, Conroy, because I want to talk about these young men.
Yes, please.
And their experience, and I want you to be the voice of their experience. And again, this is not a justification, people. This is an explanation. And if you like, I worked in forensic psychotherapy. Forensic, you'll know what this means. Forensic psychotherapy is those people who've been sent to hospitals who've done really horrible things and would normally have been sent to prison for the rest of their life. But because they have a disorder, the courts say, oh, well, they're going to go to hospital and get treatment. So now I would do work with people in those settings, not on the basis that I wanted to be nice to somebody. I mean, I generally do want to be nice to somebody, but I was working with somebody to try and make them safer. The way you make somebody safer who has antisocially acted out and murdered somebody else, for example, is that you work on their pro-social side of their personality. You make them more sociable. The way you make somebody more sociable is you behave in a sociable way towards them. Is that rocket science? Is that right? Does that surprise people? That you grow that aspect of their personality by reflecting that back to them in a social, real, loving relationship. And then there's a possibility that person will grow that aspect of their personality. And as a consequence, have a moment like I did as a kid going, oh God, that feels really horrible thinking about sticking that knife in somebody. Right? Why do people not understand that, Conroy?
You're talking about a Band of Brothers work.
I am. Tell me about what you do.
We have older men, and we like to see ourselves as, we're not experts in their life. We're not going to tell you how to live your life. We're not going to tell you what you need to do. You know what you need to do. That's where we come from. Where I can be as a mentor to you is be alongside you. I'm alongside you in your pain. I'm alongside you in your grief. You will see my vulnerabilities, and I will hold your vulnerability. And it's that exchange between younger men and older men that they see that we're fallible. You know, we've not got it all sorted out. We care, and they hear our struggles, and they hold us in our struggles as well. And that exchange, and as you say, that reflecting back, oh, there is something over there in that man that I can see.
Yeah. I'm going to nail the point home, because it really annoys me that people don't understand this stuff. And yet, they'll rabbit on as though they do know what they're talking about. What you're talking about, Conroy, and you may not be using this terminology, is you're talking about mirror neuron activation. Oh, what's that, Noel? All right. Mirror neurons are these things, neurons that exist in our brain that literally mirror what somebody else is doing. So when I wave my hand across this screen, the mirror neurons on your brain are following my hand's movement in your brain. When I show empathy and understanding and insight, when I show an aspect of that myself like that to somebody else, the mirror neurons in that person mirror that back. Ba-ba!
Excellent.
Right. Now I know this. This is why we do this work.
Right. Yes, it is.
But if I guess this, if what happens inside my head and in my behavior, I have a response to you which goes, "You fucking shit." Guess what happens inside your head? Guess which mirror neurons are activated? And it's like it isn't rocket science, right?
No, it's not. It's not rocket science. And if there's a sense that society doesn't care about you, so from a very young age, the messages young boys are getting these days is, it doesn't matter if you fail at school. It doesn't matter if you're not going to get a job that kind of satisfy you. It doesn't matter that kind of the social ladder has been pulled away. You're not going to be able to even afford a house in the town that you're born, that you was born in. So the messages of you don't count, you don't matter. There is something wrong about you. You can't fit into this new lovely world that the advertisements on the television are talking to us about. Well, what do we expect they're going to do? They're going to make it up for themselves. You know, they've got to survive. It does upset me, and it does fill me with grief, because there's the idea that let's become kinder, yeah. And to hoodie on the street, yeah, smile. Guess what? I smile at you, man. They smile back, you know, because there's some warmth there. They don't just grunt. No, they want connection. They're human. They want to be heard. They want to be accepted. Of course.
Absolutely, without doubt. And again, I think there is something about the fact that you have certain types of life experiences and you've gone through them and you process them. That means that you can offer that to the young men. And I'm talking about these neurological processes like the mirror neurons. There's aspects of your personality are alive, that are available when people are around you. I can feel it when I'm talking to you, when I'm having conversations with you. So I feel very expansive with you. I don't feel contracted. You know what I mean? It's like it's opening up, right? And it's not narrowing down. And that opening up. Now, let's just talk about this elephant in the room, because we are talking about a situation in which there's, you know, there is male violence towards women and girls, and we need to deal with that issue. And the question is, how do we deal with that issue as a culture? My belief is this, and it's men are going to deal with that male violence towards women and girls and children. Thank you. That's how it's going to happen. And men have to take it on the chin. And I have very little time, I have to say, for hashtag not all men, because to me it reads like hashtag washing my hands Pontius Pilate.
I hear that.
I don't have much time for it, to be honest.
Yeah, we're not going to go down there. That's not the deal, because hashtag whatever isn't sorting the thing out on the streets. Yeah. For me, what I want to see is more men. Just like it's up to us to stand up and step up to this issue. Yeah. It's up to us to. It's like I was saying to someone the other day. It says, you see, those people who are spiking drinks of girls or sticking needles in girls, they've got a mate, they've got a friend, they've gone out with someone. Now that person to me is almost worse than the guy doing it, because he knows something's wrong. So we've got to get into the consciousnesses of those men, and it's us men that do that and need to do that. We need to pull up our friends around this. It's our job, you know. The people I have around me, they ain't be whistling out of car windows and doing all that type of stuff. It's not going to work. Well, have those attitudes. That's someone's daughter. That's someone's sister. Is that how you'd want your kind of female relative treated on the street? But don't do it. Just don't.
You know what struck me? It's really interesting what that struck me about when you're talking about how you discovered your homophobic responses within the context of a homophobic world. Was that you'd gone with your mate and then discovered he was gay, but you had that relationship to him, and it was like, okay, hang on, this doesn't compute. I know this person, I like them, they're a part of my life, and yet there's an aspect of my personality that's telling me I should start hating them now.
Exactly.
Like, how does that work? You know, we can only hate, I think, and we can only do that sort of stuff, and we can only have this level of violence when that empathic response is switched off, when we dehumanize somebody, we make them other. Well, I mean, you know that. You know the theory of racism, you know theory of sexism, etc., etc.
Exactly. And it's also, othering. I've got to say this, Noel. The other thing that doesn't work is shaming and attacking. Yeah. That doesn't work. These behaviors are wrong, yes, but the way we deal with them, sex offenders and all this stuff going on, is not like, you're awful, you're the worst, putting them in a hole. Again, can we show compassion? Can we show some kind of openness and acceptance to the idea that your behaviors as an individual, as a human being, do not fit with the behaviors that I see fit for a kind of a whole human being? So can we work to see that I'm compassionate enough to be alongside you while we look at what's got you here? You have to own your shit. Yes, you have to take responsibility. And guess what? You might have to do some time, but you have to correct yourself, sir. You know what I mean? And I'll be alongside you while we do that.
Yeah, exactly. And the point, I suppose, is this, that nobody's talking about being a naive idiot and just allowing dangerous people to be around. It's not about that at all. But it's about saying, well, do we want to perpetuate something or do we want to stop it?
Exactly.
You know, and how do we stop these things? We need to have a realistic conversation about how we stop these things, because for damn sure, we know we haven't stopped it. And for damn sure, we know we've just been making it worse, because we can look at the stats.
Yeah.
You know, the levels of violent crime, over 90% guys. Without that. And it's just growing and growing. Exactly. So we know that the current system isn't working, and we have to know that the current system is unsustainable. Coming back, though, I think to this idea of we don't have real time to get into it, but there is. I mean, I think there's a strong argument that what we need to do is understand that the levels of violence that we're seeing, probably from a small group, a small cohort, but or relatively small cohort.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's on a scale, isn't it?
It's on a scale.
No, that's why you're going, yeah, but you know, because it's on a scale from tolerance to active support to a bit of this and then a lot more of it, you know, and it's definitely there. And you know, I put my hands up. I've done dodgy things in my life. There's no doubt about it. You know, I'm 54, mate. Seriously, you know, am I going to claim that I haven't pressured a girl when I was a kid? No, that's not true. I've done that. Yeah, of course I have. Of course I have. And you can't claim that. I mean, none of us.
It was kind of seduction in those days, kind of clumsy seduction. You know.
Go watch an early Western with Clint Eastwood, and he's basically raping women, and that's a lot. And we were laughing about it, right?
Yeah. You know, again, being in touch with the emotions to say, you know what, I really like you, but I'm not that confident a person to be able to talk to you in a way. No, you don't do that. You give it all. Well, I give it all of this. You know what I'm saying? I've got it all going on. Complete facade, complete total idiot. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I carried on like an arsehole for years. And then how do we start to get messages to young men that actually that gentler, that vulnerable soul that you actually are is acceptable, and that will get you the woman that you really want to be with, who really wants to be with you, because the person that wants to be with that isn't necessarily the person that's going to be the best person. Without a
doubt. And I guess one of the few, in the little bit of time they got, one of the points I want to make, it's interesting, you as a mental health advocate is now in this mentoring and advocacy of maleness, because I see there's a crossover, and here's the crossover for me. It's not just the role of trauma, but actually I think the way guys express psychological distress is in antisocial ways that get sanctioned rather than understood. Because they get negatively sanctioned rather than understood, that it ramps up the problem. It doesn't deal with it.
One, it ramps up the problem, and two, it almost gets glorified. I remember in Scotland some years ago when they talked about how they cut violence on the streets by actually connecting with young women to educate them to not go after or be with the bad boy, you know, and kind of glorify that violence, because it works. You know what I'm saying? There's something exciting. There's something kind of.
What's interesting is Glasgow is an interesting. We're gonna have to finish on this, but Glasgow is an interesting city. I mean, Glasgow's been an interesting city for many years as a public health issue. It's like guys in Glasgow have died 5 to 10 years earlier than guys anywhere else in the UK. And we've always been like, why is this happening? One of the reasons being they're isolated. But anyway, there was a thing in Glasgow about knife crime.
That's right.
And very much part of Glaswegian culture. And they spent years and years and years trying to deal with these guys who were going around chibbing each other. That's the word for knifing somebody in Glasgow. And eventually they went, let's have a different approach to it. And they chose to treat it as an illness, as a contagious illness, as though it were a virus spreading. And they used public health measures, exactly the sort of public health measures just used with this current pandemic and virus. And guess what? The problem's gone away.
It's certainly lessened, and it's certainly not spoke about in the same way. And Glasgow is a much safer place now than it was when I visited back in the 80s and 90s.
And that was just by treating it as a health problem. And I think that's there's something to be learned there in terms of the framing, the dialogue, and the understanding. What we're seeing around some of the more frightening aspects of hypermasculinity at the moment. If we actually do see it, I think, or frame it as a health problem and start, you know, it is. I think it's a health problem.
Just like the drugs is a health problem. You know, addiction's a health problem. These are all symptoms of a society that's actually in some sort of trauma itself.
And even if people don't want to buy into that bit of it, we know it's effective when you treat it as a health problem. No, it's not effective if you treat it as a criminal justice problem.
It's not helping. We're spending more and more each year on locking people up, and more people wanting to build more jails.
And the reality is this, that, you know, if you look at, say, the US, which has more of its population in prison than anywhere else on the planet, but they have prisons which make money.
Well, exactly. Yes.
We don't. So we're costing us money. And when we're not even using our prisoners as slave labor like they are in America, it's crazy, right?
We do have private jails here, though, Noel.
Yeah, but we haven't got to the point where they're actually allowed to make a profit at the
No, not a profit. No, they're shareholders. Anyway,
but I guess that's my point, is that there needs to be a radical reframing of this.
The whole criminal justice system needs.
It can't cope, and it never will cope.
Just like the health system, just like the care system, the justice system. All of these are antiquated systems that have gone beyond their time and usefulness, and they're not sustainable for how we need to grow.
And don't even get me started on Mental Health Act, you cheap, because that show will never end. Before we have to finish, though. We're going to bring you back on. We have to. But before we finish, tell me about, firstly, where do people find out more about you? How do they get hold of your organisation? How do they help you and get involved? And have you got any projects coming at the moment that you want to tell us about? So in that order.
There's so much. Go onto kind of the web, A Band of Brothers. It's all one word, abandofbrothers.org.uk. On our website, you'll find all about us. We've got our kind of donations piece. If you want to give a donation to help us in our work, we're always looking to...
Before Conroy skirts over that, he gets embarrassed about asking for money. I know this. But this is people, you don't know this. What happened during the pandemic was that a lot of the charities had live events which they would raise money from and stuff like that. And so they would top up their income. And that, of course, all went during the pandemic. So now, post-pandemic, what's happened is every single charity has lost loads of money because of the pandemic, and everybody has gone to the charitable giving sources at the same time, asking for that loss to be made up. So there are so many snouts in that trough at the moment, and people are going under. And I need to make that point. If you get on Conroy's website, I want you to donate money. You absolutely must do that. All right, Conroy, I've done that for you.
Thank you. And if you want someone to do something about those boys who are outside you on the street corner, that kind of bringing fear into your neighborhood, then join a Band of Brothers. Come and be part of us. Go onto the website. On there are all the details of our communities, how you can get involved. We've got a lot of exciting projects. As I say, we're from Cornwall all the way up to Manchester. We've got projects across the Midlands, across the South, and we're growing. We're at a time when we're ready to grow. There's a lot of interest in our work out there because there are men do care. Men count and we care, and they want to get involved in their communities. And we're a great vehicle for you to get on board and join us. It's our job, guys. It's our job.
And you might, if you're lucky, you might, like me, you might get to spend some time with this amazing man and have just fantastic conversations. There's been nothing as healing as this for me in a long time, Conroy. I've just been such a pleasure, absolute genuine pleasure. It's like I've been on a journey through my own history. We didn't even talk about the miners' strike. Don't start me on the miners' strike. Don't start me.
Cannon Chase, yes. Anchorage. Don't start.
Absolutely.
Pleasure, no.
we're gonna have to finish there, Conroy. We're gonna have to. I'm so sorry, but it's been such a joy to have you on, and we're gonna obviously bring you back on and catch up with the work that your guys do. What might be nice. I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot. You don't need to say this, but yes or no now. But it might be nice to have one of your young guys on.
Not a problem. I can.
You know what I mean? You come on and talk about what's going on and what the world's like.
Their journey.
Yes. Do you know what I mean? It'd be so cool. It'd be so cool.
We've got to say.
You stay there, folks. I've got to say goodbye. It's been an amazing show for me. I'm sort of like, I'm just like, I've been so many memories and thoughts and experiences from the whole of my life of just emerged this evening. So I hope I haven't been too self-indulgent and that you found it really helpful. So goodbye, everybody. Conroy, you stay there, and I'll catch up with you all next week. Thanks very much.
Bye, everybody.